All right, it looks like we are live. So I am joined by the fabulous Anna, and I will let you introduce yourself.
Yeah, so my name's Anna. I'm an OCD and mental health advocate on Instagram. Yeah, and that's how I met Mollie and heard of No CD.
Yeah, and I am Mollie. For any of you who, I realize I talk with my hands way too much, but I am Mollie, and I also advocate on Instagram for OCD and mental health awareness, and I work for No CD as well as a peer advisor. So I am so excited that you are joining me today, Anna, and I see so many questions already, which is really, really cool.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, so I am going to click on this first one, and I'll ask it since you're drinking. So Andrea said, "Hi Mollie, I have a couple questions. Can OCD make you frustrated a lot? How do I stop being afraid of leaving my house and being okay shopping again? I'm so tired of living in fear and wish I could stop." So first of all, you're not alone in those feelings. And I know that is something we say often, but it is so true. OCD really can make us feel all kinds of ways. So frustrated, scared, all of those things, yes. Can OCD make you frustrated? Yes. How do I stop being afraid? So I would say to embrace. I am so sorry if you heard my dogs. They just apparently had to say that they were here too. My partner has them downstairs. Hopefully they will stay quiet. How do I stop being afraid of leaving my house and being okay shopping again? So just embrace that. It's okay to be afraid. And part of therapy in OCD treatment is recognizing that those feelings are all valid and are okay. And being afraid is not the problem. It is avoiding things and not doing the things that you love. It sounds like shopping is something you enjoy. So I'd say get back out there as much as you can. Do you have anything to add to that, Anna?
No, I would say the exact same thing. I mean, I also feel like just with OCD, everything, I feel like I'm just always frustrated because I'm either like not able to do things or not able to go places, or I just I shut down. And so I feel like frustration with OCD is really, really common.
Yeah, for sure. And then Josh, and I also I see that he asked this question again later. So I do want to remind everyone, if you ask a question before the live, that we do get to see them. So I know that, you don't know that until the live starts, but so I did see this question a couple minutes before the live. So I'm just really glad that you're here, Josh. And he said, "I read about your experience with OCD, and as a college student currently undergoing treatment myself, I'm interested in hearing about how OCD affects your life now versus back then." And I love that question because college was really, for me, was kind of my lowest point. I was out of my comfort zone. I was away from my family and my house and everything that I loved and that kept me safe. And so, or what I thought was keeping me safe. So I think it's really amazing, Josh, that you are in treatment already and that you are a college student going through treatment. College is not easy, and going through OCD treatment is definitely not easy. So the fact that you're doing both of them is amazing already. So how OCD affects my life now versus back then. So in college, and throughout my entire life, I had a lot of mental compulsions in terms of checking, rechecking lists, ruminating, all kinds of things. So I remember sitting in college classes, and for some reason I had to be constantly checking what was in my backpack or like in my bag that I took to class. And so I would in my head be kind of remembering exactly where everything in the bag was and going through it and I would not be doing well in class because I was so caught up in needing to know those things and that sense of urgency. And that's just kind of a really simple, example that comes to mind, but that was really impactful. And I was not able to enjoy college as much as I wanted to in terms of meeting new people and going to parties and all of those kind of stereotypical things that people do in college. I really missed out on because of my fears and because of my OCD holding me back. So now I still have OCD and it still does affect my life, but in much, I'm trying to think of a better word, in not as intense ways. So it is still there, it is still present sometimes, but it is not as, it doesn't consume me as much. It's something that I can kind of recognize that it is OCD and I can apply the things that I've learned in treatment and let it, kind of pass through, if that makes sense.
Also, I think going through treatment while you're in college is like, that's amazing. I don't think I would be able to juggle doing both. Like I was barely able to juggle beginning treatment and working. It's really hard. So I think like you should give yourself a lot of kudos for that, because that's huge.
Yeah. And OCD itself is like having a full-time job, and getting treatment, it just takes up so much time. So that's, it's incredible. Especially now with I assume a lot of things online and not, the typical classes anymore. So yeah, that's so great. Do you want to read this one?
Sure. All right. So lately I've been having this fear of going crazy and losing my mind. I can get myself so worked up that I go into a panic attack. Any advice or suggestions on how to get over this fear? So first, like, that's definitely, I feel like, I know we can't give like advice or like tell you those things, but I definitely feel like going crazy and losing your mind is so common, and fearing that you're just like out of control and can't control what you're doing is like such a huge aspect of OCD. And getting yourself so worked up over like into panic attacks. Like I definitely, I know personally that used to be me. Like I would have panic attacks constantly over my thoughts, and just like I'd be so concerned that what I did or didn't do, and I would just have these meltdowns and breakdowns almost every day. I definitely would suggest like talking to, if you have like an ERP therapist, or if you have like a therapist in general, talking to them about what's going on and seeing if you can make like a plan with them, or finding people that you can reach out to when you kind of feel yourself getting like really like worked up and overwhelmed. So you can just be like, hey, like, can we chat for like 5 or 10 minutes? Like I need to just kind of get my head out of this space. I'm not sure if you have any other.
Yeah, panic attacks are terrifying. And that idea that I know when I have a panic attack, which I think is pretty common, it feels like it's never going to end. And I would, so my advice would be to recognize that it is. And I know, as someone right now, that we are both, calm and not super anxious. It's easy to say that when you're in it. I know it's so much harder to believe that. But any panic attack you've ever had has passed, and it has ended, and you're not having one right now. So I think that's something to keep in mind when you do have one. Again, I know that's so much easier said than done, but yeah, I think what you said, just having somebody to reach out to, getting outside can be helpful.
Absolutely.
And then this one is a double question that goes right below. Okay. So how do I get over a false memory? You go ahead.
I mean, you'll never really know if you're going to get over a false memory, or if the memory you have is true or false. Those are so tricky. Like false memory, I hate them.
I feel like I read something recently about somebody was like having a dream, and they said like they woke up and they were like, was that actually a dream, or was that a memory? And if it was a memory, was it a real memory of something that actually happened? And again, that what if cycle is just never ending.
Spiral. Yeah, I'd say like once that thought gets into your brain, like what if, is this a false memory? What if it's not? I would just like be mindful, just like hear the thought, let it sit and rattle around in your brain, and then just continue on and being mindful of what you were doing prior to that thought being there.
Yeah, that's good advice. I like that. Yeah, because false memories, like our brains are so creative. They can come up with anything, whether it actually happened or didn't. And that's something that we, like you said, can't really ever know, honestly.
Yeah, and especially with dreams too, that's so hard because like, I don't know, like I'm half asleep, I'm so unaware of it.
Yeah, for sure. I can hear the TV on downstairs. I think my husband is watching this, so it's like I can like hear myself kind of. It's weird. How do I get over the fear of relapsing in my OCD? It gives a lot of anxiety because it was so hard to deal with before ERP. Yeah, just use those skills. It sounds like, Angel, you've gotten some strategies that you've learned in therapy. Apply them to this experience. As weird as that sounds, it is what's going to get you through. If you do relapse or if you don't relapse, the fear of relapsing, I think, is sometimes worse than the actual relapse. So
yeah,
that would be my advice.
And I think also just like accepting that you might relapse. Like we can't be 100% certain that you are in recovery and that you're going to just continue on the track that you are when you finish treatment, or like if you're in a really good place after treatment, you can't guarantee that you'll be there forever. So even just kind of like accepting that, hey, this might not be my forever. I might relapse, something might come up. I find that that's really helpful too.
Absolutely. This is me. So this person is very cryptic in their name, but they were here last week and asked some really good questions too.
Awesome.
So I'm excited to see them again. Well, first of all, thank you. I love these lives. How do you deal with intrusive thoughts? They are becoming more frequent. Yeah, and that is, we're going to sound like a broken record, but ERP is how you deal with them. And intrusive thoughts are just thoughts that you don't want and that are, go against you and what you value a lot of times. So allow them, accept the presence of the thoughts, which I know is a really hard thing to do when they are violent or sexual or anything that you don't want. It's really hard to accept them. It doesn't mean you're agreeing with them. It just means that you're accepting them as thoughts, and they come and they go.
Yeah, and I think it's really important too to like not place any value or like any extra weight on those thoughts, because once you do that, you're just letting OCD take even more control of your over your brain and the decisions that you're making, and taking more of your day away from you.
Yeah, I one time, I don't remember if it was my therapist or someone just told me, like, if you, no matter how much you think right now of $1 million, and like you can picture it in the corner right there, and like you can like smell it and feel it, like it doesn't make it any more likely for $1 million to appear in the corner. And that's like, of course, like we all know that, we all can recognize that. So no matter what kind of thoughts you have and think of and even, wish for, they're not going to magically come true. And I know that, again, magical thinking is really challenging with OCD, that whatever we think and want even is not, has no bearing on it actually happening.
Yeah.
What advice? Oh, sorry, you want to take that one?
Yeah. What advice do you have for partners of people with OCD? I feel like this is so overlooked a lot of the time, that when you like have OCD, especially when you start treatment, I feel like sometimes it's just like completely overlooked. Like people are just like, okay, I need to get treatment for myself. I need to do this for myself, which is huge and really important. But I think it's also like people forget that like our partners are really affected, and our family members are also really affected by our OCD. So I would like suggest like having them join, if you're in therapy sessions, like have them join therapy with you, have them be a part of the plan that you have for your ERP, talk to them about how you're feeling and the thoughts you're having and what's going on. I find the more that you talk about it with your partner and the more open you are about it, the easier it is for them to be able to help you, or to even just begin to understand what you're going through and what's going on inside your head.
Yeah. I think that's really great advice for sure. I think it's, just being open, being honest with what you're going through. And I know it's really hard sometimes because you don't necessarily even know what you need, but being open with what you need and saying, I need you to, fill in the blank. And as long as it's helping you. And I think it's important too, to know your compulsions, so that your partner is not unintentionally giving in to your OCD for you. I know that's really common, is, especially I'm just thinking of like contamination OCDs, having your partner open the door for you because you don't want to touch it, is just, having them, it's just roping them into that compulsion for you. And that's in the long run not effective. It's not going to help. And just being open with them, which is hard when you don't know even sometimes, but.
Yeah. And there's also really there's a lot of really great resources, like some podcasts and books too, that you could have your partner listen to and read, that just like explain more about OCD in depth and what you as a caregiver or a family member or a partner can do to support loved ones with OCD.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't want to trigger you, but one of my things is I feel that I have compulsions and rituals that no one else has. Could you share what some things you struggled with? Yeah. So Valerie, I think that is, not to reassure you, but very common with OCD, is that it makes us think that we are the only ones with these compulsions or with these thoughts, with these urges, obsessions, whatever it is. And you're probably not. In, just to answer that one bit is, because I remember that as well, as thinking for many years in my childhood, thinking like there can't be anyone else that has these feelings. I must be the only person. I cannot, I can't imagine there being anybody else experiencing this. And fortunately or unfortunately, that's just not true. There are so many people who do. But some things that I struggled with that are just kind of like random things that I didn't know anybody else did until I connected with them is, again, going back to list making is, I know, Anna, you and I have talked about this like on a very personal level, of just things that have no bearing on anything. And I had to have a list of them, and I had to have them written down. I would rewrite them. And it would be, again, things like what I remember I had a list of what DVDs I own, and I would like have to alphabetize it, and then I would like put it in a different order and have to rewrite it then. And like, it was just takes up so much time. And it just felt so urgent at that time.
Yeah, I actually found a book from when I was like younger, a notebook recently, and I was looking through it, and it was just pages of lists of things that made absolutely no sense. Like most of the time when people think of lists, they're like grocery lists or a to-do list or things you need to pack. And I had written like the different sizes of shoes that I owned and like just like so much stuff. And I was looking through and I was like, oh my gosh, like, yeah. But, and I think like as upsetting as it is, thinking that like most other people that struggle with OCD will struggle with a compulsion or a ritual that you have. And like, as upsetting as it is that so many other people struggle, it's kind of nice sometimes when you connect with someone and you're like, oh my gosh, you think the exact same thing that I think, or you've done a compulsion or been in a situation that I've been in. And it's just kind of nice to know that there's other people out there. It's not just you on this like lonely island and you're stranded.
The OCD.
So it's really, I don't know, it's kind of nice knowing that there's other people out there. But I feel like I've struggled with OCD my entire life. So I feel like I've touched on almost every single like theme that there can be. But yeah, like I definitely like reassurance seeking is like literally my full-time job. Like, I could seek reassurance all day long from anybody who has 1 minute to listen to me. Like I could just go off.
It's funny because I've sometimes I get annoyed when people ask, like, what themes do you deal with? Because I've dealt with them all. And like, there are certain ones that bring me more anxiety. And there are certain things that take up more time. And yeah, like what you're saying, reassurance seeking is like to this day, even though I consider myself in recovery, like it still gets me sometimes.
So hard.
And list making and checking and things like that, really do still impact me. But every theme, I've really dealt, I feel like, and that's just my experience, but I do think that I've, kind of experienced a little bit of everything, because OCD does not discriminate, and it doesn't care if it's something that you've dealt with in the past. It can just, tomorrow it might be a completely different theme. And I think that's important to know as well, that it often jumps around, from theme to theme.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I'll just take one of those.
Ooh. Recognizing the difference between relationship OCD versus emotions or thoughts regarding your relationship. That's hard. I won't lie. Like I'm still really struggling trying to find like that, like the boundary of like what is OCD and what is appropriate or what isn't appropriate to ask and what isn't like appropriate to bring up versus like what is. Yeah, I've definitely like, for me, I've had my boyfriend join therapy sessions with me where he's been able to talk to my therapist to be like, these are things that I've noticed or things that she does. And my therapist was like, full stop. We're not doing that anymore. But it's things to me that I've like never noticed. And then I'll bring up other things. And she's like, yeah, that's like a good thing to talk about. And I find like after kind of practicing it a few times, I feel like I kind of have like more of a grip on what feels like a really actual urgent pressing thing and something that I can delay for 5 minutes and then realize it's actually not something that I need to bring up.
Yeah. And I think that, so like as well, like I never knew that my things were part of probably relationship OCD until later. Like I remember I used to compare my relationship to my friends a lot.
All the time.
I would text them and I would be like, do you and your partner ever, whatever it is, doesn't even matter. And of course, they probably do, they probably don't, whatever, it doesn't matter. It was that reassurance seeking, that like trying to make sure that what I'm doing as a girlfriend, as a wife, whatever is the right thing to do. And there is no right thing to do. Every relationship is so different.
Yeah.
That's hard. Yeah. Recognizing the difference because it just feels so urgent. And it's something as well that I think is important is that if your OCD is latching onto your relationship, it's not through any fault of your partner. It is, and not that it's through any fault of yours either, of course, but it is your OCD. It's not, your partner just happens to be the thing it's landed on this time. It's not any more valid in terms of, needing an answer, needing a response right now. It is just OCD trying to, get there as much as it can.
Yeah.
And Lila asked, I know I shouldn't have compulsions, but when I do, when disgusting thoughts say I agree with them, something really bad just doesn't react. If I keep quiet, I feel like I agree, but not. What do I do? I'll let you take that one because you were nodding your head. So I think you have a good one.
It's really hard too when you have those thoughts that you label as like disgusting thoughts or really uncomfortable, sticky thoughts. It's so hard when your brain tries to trick you to be like, if you're not going to do anything about this and you're not going to say anything, that means you believe this thought or this thought's true. And it's so uncomfortable, especially when they're like those more like taboo, like intrusive thoughts. Maybe it's like a sexual intrusive thought or a harm intrusive thought, right? Like it's hard, but I don't know. I always just do the opposite of what my OCD wants, right? So it's like, you need to admit to this. It's like, well, you want me to, but I'll just sit with this. And at the end of the day, you never really know about that thought, right? Like maybe you are, maybe you aren't. And
Yeah. And I think just I shouldn't have compulsions just breaks my heart a little bit because that's not, having OCD is not a choice and it's not something that we should or shouldn't do. And I know, again, that's so hard when you're in it, but have some grace for yourself and know that, trying anything, reaching out to us on here, reaching out to a therapist, like it's all progress. It's all good. Every time we, like Anna said, fight back against the OCD, do the opposite of what it wants us to do. That's a win in itself. So it's really hard when it is and again, thoughts are not good or bad thoughts. So it might be a thought about something disgusting, but the thought itself is not, if that makes sense. And I know that's, exactly. It's just a thought. And it's so scary when it feels so real. But it is another thought, just like anything else.
Yeah.
They read that post too. It must have been on, I can't remember where I read it, but I'm glad that they read it too, because it was interesting. Like a dream is just another thought that we have when we're unconscious. We're not in control of it.
Yeah.
And I'll let you take this one because I know that's something that that you have dealt with.
Yeah. So how did the pandemic affect both of your OCD between the lockdowns, quarantines, obsessive cleanliness standards? So before COVID hit, I was in like a pretty decent place with my OCD, I would say. And then COVID hit and it like everything went out the window. Like I felt like I forgot every single thing I'd ever learned in my entire life. And the only thing that I knew was OCD and to do everything it wanted to. I definitely feel like I had a harder time like with the lockdowns and the quarantines, just because there was so much uncertainty about everything that I was like triple guessing everything and anything I did. And I felt like anything that I did do, there was this like huge threat with it. Like if I left my house, I was a horrible person for leaving my house. If I didn't wipe things down enough, I was a horrible person like I was a horrible person because I didn't wipe them down. So that was really hard. And I think also too with like the cleaning standards, that was hard because the CDC said one thing and my OCD was like, we're going to one up this. You want me to do this, but we need to do more.
Yeah.
So it definitely was hard, but I think like at the end of the day, I know it's hard to look at it this way sometimes, as frustrating as it was that I'd gone through that. I was kind of grateful for it just because that's when I did ultimately decide to reach out for help, because I'd just become like I shut down basically. Right. And so if I didn't kind of have that rock bottom, then I wouldn't have been able to get to the point where I am and meet fabulous people like Mollie. So
yeah.
Yeah.
And I've never experienced contamination OCD in terms of like cleanliness in that sense. So that honestly, as much as it was so difficult for a lot of people, that was never really an issue for me in terms of the pandemic and dealing with the guidelines and things like that. But the lockdown, the quarantine, that was really challenging. I was a teacher before joining NoCD, and that was so heartbreaking to not be able to see my students. We left on a Friday. They told us we'd be back in 2 weeks, and here we are, and we've never gone back. So I obviously left the classroom and joined NoCD's team, and et cetera. But that uncertainty of not knowing when we were going to be back, not knowing when I was going to see my students again, my family. I have a sister with 2 young kids, not knowing when I was going to see them next. That's hard. And it was and is still really hard. And that's, I think, again, just knowing that we don't know is really difficult for anybody to deal with, let alone OCD and people who kind of need that, strive for that certainty.
But I think like COVID is also a really good example of like how anxious you can become because of uncertainty for people who maybe don't understand OCD or they don't personally live with it. I think a lot of people kind of realized how anxious and stress inducing uncertainty really is for people.
Yeah. And I think the loneliness that goes with
absolutely
lockdowns, like my partner's job did not change. Obviously there were different guidelines, but he went to work every single day and I was home every single day. And that was really hard, was not being able to not even go out and do things, but just interact with other humans in person. It was, as much as I liked it, sometimes it is challenging. And we, humans are not meant to be alone, and that can be really hard too.
Yeah.
I like the name. What should I do about always having always having the need to confess my thoughts? I want them to be just thoughts, but I feel guilty if I don't confess. Yeah. You have an answer for that one?
Wow.
We're good.
Yeah, feeling guilty because you're not confessing. So OCD is obviously trying to make you confess and wants you to feel that guilt. But at the end of the day, is like, what difference will not confessing make, right?
Mm-hmm.
You'll be anxious in either of the situations, confessing or not confessing.
That's what I was going to say. Is I know OCD brings on that feeling of guilt already. So yeah, if you do confess, you'll probably still feel guilty for saying those things out loud or for sharing them with somebody. So the need to confess is, again, just is a compulsion. And that's, so like you were saying earlier, do the opposite, do what it's telling you to do the exact opposite of that.
Yeah. And it's short-term. My therapist always says this, it's short-term pain for long-term gain. Yeah. So in like the first 5 or 10 minutes of you not confessing, you're going to be extremely anxious and stressed out and worried. And then I bet you hours after the situation, you won't even think about it because you didn't give into OCD.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And the feeling of pride that comes with not giving in, it's worth it. And it's so strong sometimes compared to those feelings of guilt, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, can obsession about food fall into OCD? I feel a need to eat meals at a specific time every day and plan around that. I've done it for years. I also typically eat the same few meals for a very long time.
Yeah, and it's really hard when OCD affects food because like you need food to survive. And so when OCD starts labeling things as good as bad or something you can have and you can't have, or you can only eat at these specific times, and if you don't, then you're out of luck. Like it's really hard, and it's really consuming of your life.
Yeah. And I do know, again, we are not clinicians, but I do know that OCD and eating disorders have a very big overlap in terms of, somebody that has one will sometimes have both. So I don't want to go into eating disorder talk very much because I personally don't have a whole lot of experience in, in research or anything like that in eating disorders. but it can definitely overlap. And again, an obsession about food, you can have an obsession about anything. So for it to be about food is really challenging. So again, do what the OCD is telling you, or do the opposite of what the OCD is telling you, I would say, in that case too.
Yeah. And I would definitely like bring this up with like an OCD or like ERP therapist too, just to get that, because like I feel like that could spiral quickly too.
Absolutely, yeah. Do you want to read that one?
Yeah. Can it still be OCD if you don't have any at work compulsion? So I think you're meaning like if you don't like do any compulsions at work, so maybe you do them like before or after work. Yeah, it definitely still can. Like I know personally, if I know that I'm going to be with a group of people or I need to leave my house for work or I'm going to like be in meetings, like in-person meetings, I definitely try to like switch my brain so that I don't do compulsions in front of others, but then I would come home and do them. So I would like make up for the time I wasn't doing them. But I feel like it's definitely like it definitely is still OCD. You're just trying to find different ways to accommodate it.
Yeah. I think I can't say that any better. And yeah, it is so interesting with that, even though we know it is, because I think, Ray, at the end of the day, I think you know that it is and that it can be. And it sounds like, oh, okay. So
outward. Oh, outward.
Gotcha. Okay. So not gotcha. So that's a very different question then. But yes, the answer still is yes. If they're all mental, it sounds like you are asking. Or not even necessarily mental, but not like physical, that other people can see. Yeah. And that's, absolutely. You can definitely have compulsions that are just mental. There is a term called pure O, which it's a controversial term sometimes in this field, but it just means that you have compulsions that are mainly mental and not outwardly physical. And yeah, they absolutely can be part of OCD for sure.
Yeah.
And that is my main compulsions are mental. Honestly, I don't have a lot of physical compulsions. And it can be really hard to recognize that that's OCD because you can't see them. You can't, like you can physically stop. I don't mean to say that you can, but you can physically see certain compulsions, and that makes it a little bit easier to recognize and to talk about sometimes, I think.
Yeah. And I think that really like steers people away from learning more about OCD or trying to like get a diagnosis too, just because they're like, well, it's just everything. Like I'm just thinking about it, or I'm just doing it in my head, or I'm like scanning my body or whatever it is. And so I think it's definitely important to know that just because you're not physically doing it doesn't mean it's not OCD.
And I think as well doesn't mean it's not as distressing. So I know a lot of times, people will be like, well, it's just anxiety. It's just in your head. Just stop. And it's like that, of course, it's not that easy. If I would, I could. But also just because you don't see it doesn't mean it's not eating you alive.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Alex asked, sometimes when I see sometimes when I have an intrusive thought, I go over and over it in my mind, almost like reassuring myself that it didn't happen. Any advice? Do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, so you probably are trying to reassure yourself that things didn't happen. And that's exactly like what OCD wants you to do, right? They want you to get stuck into that cycle of could I, would I do this? And it's really hard too, because like at the end of the day, you do want to reassure yourself so much to be like, well, I'm not this person, or I didn't do that, or I do these things, so I'm good, right? And it's really distressing and really stressful. So again, like I would reach out to an ERP therapist or an OCD specialist if you feel like you are just stuck and don't really know what to do. And they would definitely be able to put together a really great plan with you to work through that.
Yeah. And I think a lot of times when it comes to reassuring ourselves, just saying maybe not is terrifying, but it is, in the long run, it is helpful. Because reassuring yourself and asking for reassurance from your family or friends is compulsive, and it is short term, it might make you feel a little bit better, but then the doubt will creep right back in and, have you doubting whatever it is that it's going to latch onto next, and just kind of keep making its rounds.
Yeah.
Catherine, it says your question was skipped, and I apologize. I would love for you to ask it again. There are a lot, so I'm trying to get to as many as we can. So I apologize. If you want to ask it again, go ahead. A lot of people are talking about Puro, which is so interesting. Like I have so many, I understand a lot of the different arguments for it and against the term. And it's so interesting. But again, OCD is OCD, regardless of what it is obsessing over.
Yes.
Allie, go ahead. You want to take that one?
Yeah. Well, it's awesome that you're joining these lives. I love that there's like so many people that come back every week for these. How many times do you guys do ERP in a day? I feel like, I don't know how many times I do it. I definitely implement ERP as much as I can into my day. But I do, just because I am still in like the beginning stages of recovery, I still try to make sure that I have planned exposures. Just like from my treatment plan, I try to have planned exposures pretty often still. But yeah, I try to do ERP as often as I can.
Yeah, and it's such a personalized thing, and that's it's going to be different for everybody. But yeah, I like what you said, that planned exposures, because the unplanned exposures are always going to come up. They're not they're not things we can avoid. They're just part of being a human. So I think it is really important as well to have planned exposures so that you can really work on the things that you need to work on, I guess.
Yeah.
And then Valerie asked, can you, well, first of all, you're welcome. And thank you for being here. Can you experience a bit of all or some of the subtypes?
Yeah. OCD will latch onto anything and everything that you have, I think, that you love, that means a lot to you, that you value, anything.
Yeah.
I started therapy but didn't want to do the work fully. Yeah. I'm starting to get better at that, but any tips at forcing yourself to fight? I think it's really hard too at the beginning once you started therapy to want to fully commit. I was terrified to start it because I was like, I'm going to be giving up every single compulsion I've ever done. And as stressful as compulsions are, I was like, they were my little bit, I get like, they're kind of like comforting because it's what I know, it's what helped with my anxiety to bring it down very momentarily. But I don't know, you kind of have to ask yourself too, like if you're ready for it. Sometimes you're just not ready for therapy. It's too much, or you're putting too much value on yourself to go in fully. So I would say like, you're in therapy right now. I think that's huge. So I would give yourself like a pat on the back for that, and just maybe like talk with your therapist about what's too much or where you should, like if there's a place you can meet in the middle.
Yeah, and I think it's important to remember, especially in the beginning as well, that the reason you start, reminding yourself the reason you started, and thinking of what you've lost or what OCD has taken from you, what you want to get back, and what kind of life you want to live. And that sometimes can be the motivator when you are feeling kind of stuck, because like you're saying, you can't necessarily force yourself to be ready. You need to just be ready, which is, kind of counterintuitive, but like you said, being in therapy already is a big step, and you're already taking those steps, and thinking of the reason you started therapy is, I think could be really beneficial.
And like therapy is hard. It doesn't, just because at the beginning it's hard doesn't mean it'll ever get easier. So like it has its ups and downs, right? So like maybe you don't feel like fully putting in the work right now, but maybe later on you will.
Yeah, just keep going. Okay, so here was the question from before. I have sensory motor and it temporarily transfers to my partner. The only time I experience symptoms is with him when he is temporarily experiencing it. It disrupts intimate time together. Advice. And I know Anna, you've talked about sensory motor before, so I'll let you
Sensory motor it's hard because sometimes I'm like, is this like a voluntary thing that I'm doing or is it involuntary, right? So, and I think like having it transfer to your partner. So do you mean like your partner's doing something and you feel the need to do that as well? Or is it something that like like a symptom that he's experiencing that you're believing that you're also experiencing? But like definitely like it disrupting intimate time together. I completely get that. It's like OCD consumes everything, right? And so it's really hard when you're in those like intimate moments to sometimes be really mindful and to not give into any thoughts or compulsions that OCD is telling you to do. But like I would just say like, I don't know, like I would chat with your therapist about that more. If you have one, or like reach out to someone that you know that you can chat with about OCD.
Yeah. Yeah. And sensory motor can, like you said, it can be so tricky because so for those who don't know, it's when you get obsessions about like bodily function. So people about blinking or breathing, your heart beating sometimes. I remember when I was younger, that was a lot. It really consumed a lot of me. Was I would get obsessed with my heartbeat, and I would swear that I could like feel my heart beating more sometimes, and things like you said, things that are just natural, normal parts of living. And when your brain gets kind of hooked on one of those, it's so hard to do anything. So I can imagine that intimacy is so challenging when you are so focused on something, especially when you are trying to do something with your body like that. I have, my heart goes out to you, Catherine, because it sounds so challenging. And like we were saying earlier, be as open with your partner as you can, so that they know what, even if you don't know how to help yourself, at least just getting on the same page with your partner might be kind of a good first step, I'd say.
Yeah. And sometimes once your partner is aware of those things, like some of the compulsions that you're doing or you're experiencing, once you've chatted with them about it, sometimes I find that can help too, because then they're more aware of what you should and shouldn't be doing. And so they can kind of snap you out of it and get you to stop. Because I don't know, for me personally, there's nothing worse than just like my boyfriend continuously nagging at me to stop doing stuff. So once he notices something, I'm like, okay.
Yes. Yeah. And I think with any type of OCD, it always feels like whatever your current obsession is. I know people sometimes will say like, this just sounds so silly, or this sounds so dumb.
Yeah.
And it can be in the sense that it is things that other people don't have to deal with necessarily. But that's not, again, a reflection on you, or on your relationship, or on your intimacy, or on your partner. So I would say, just being open and being aware of what you are experiencing can help.
Yeah.
Yes, it is a start or sign of willingness. I love that. Sign of willingness. That's a really good term.
Yeah. Okay. What kind of baby steps? I'm not sure if I clicked that. I might have.
No, I think I did.
Okay. What kind of baby steps are recommended for contamination so I can stop wiping my food down and not feel like they're dirty or something is getting on me? How do I stop being afraid of dirt? So I'm just thinking, because like literally I was thinking about this stuff like earlier today. I was like, I shouldn't be wiping down my food anymore, but I definitely gave into it and did it. I would reach out to like an ERP therapist or an OCD specialist to start ERP and to make like a hierarchy and start tackling some of these things. But even like starting where it's like wiping, if OCD wants you to wipe food down 4 times, only doing it 3 times, right? Or like you'll never really know if your food is dirty or if you're dirty after eating your food, right? Like just consuming it anyways, or something might get on you, something might not. And just kind of taking that leap in there, right? And just maybe not.
Yeah, and I as well, again, not necessarily with contamination, but this morning there literally was a bug on my stovetop. And like it was terrifying because like that's where my food needs to go. And I was like, you, sir, are not paying rent. Like, get out of here. You don't belong in this house. And I still cooked on that stove, and I remember like I had lunch and I heated up my soup, and I purposely chose that stove burner, that burner, because that's where the bug was, and it was scary, and it's, I can't know if that bug had any disease or just, and even for me, it's just the idea that there was a bug like that in itself terrified me. I'm still here, and I said, I did the opposite. My OCD was like, hey, use this burner. This one is not safe. There was a bug on it. And I was like, hey, guess what? I'm going to eat my soup on this burner. So that is, to me was a success that I still did that. I still was afraid. I don't, just because you go against your compulsion does not necessarily take away that fear. And I think that's an important part too, is that the goal of therapy is not necessarily to get rid of the fear. It's to live even with the fear.
Yeah, accept that fear, that maybe you will be fearful of something, maybe you won't, maybe the fear will go away, maybe it won't, right? Like just accepting that you never really know.
Yeah. It's so scary, but I love that. Yeah. I hate when you have such good advice and I'm like, yeah, I know, but I don't want to.
No, you also have really great advice to talk about.
Do you want to take Alia's question?
Yeah. Can you talk about being toxic for your partner because of your relationship OCD and breakups that may be best in that situation? My relationship OCD caused me to blame her for my obsessions. I've hurt her so badly. I think that's a really common thought, actually, that like you think you're the one, like a toxic person in a relationship, and especially because of relationship OCD. And I think it's really important to kind of look at it too, that you aren't your OCD, right? Like you're you, and then OCD is something that has uninvitedly entered your brain, and it's like this little annoying roommate that you just can never get rid of, right? And so like maybe in that moment breaking up, like it might have been the best decision, it might have not, right? You'll never really know. But I think just like kind of being open and chatting with that about, sorry, my dog is,
I thought I heard that.
yeah,
You're up.
Okay, maybe he's eaten a lot of grass today, so he's fine. I lost my train of thought though.
About being toxic. Yeah, that's, again, like you were saying, just being open with your partner, and that the OCD is the toxic one in the relationship, not the person.
Yeah.
What is ERP? So ERP it stands for Exposure and Response Prevention, and it is a type of therapy that treats OCD. So it's basically the exposure part is intentionally exposing yourself to the situation or the urge or the thing that causes your anxiety. Yeah. And then, so triggering your anxiety on purpose. And then the RP, response prevention, is preventing the compulsion, which is the typical response. So the compulsion relieves the anxiety in the short term, but over time, it trains your brain that there is something to be afraid of. And so preventing that compulsion kind of rewires your brain to recognize that it is a false alarm and that you can deal with. I definitely just stumbled through all of my words, but that you can deal with the exposure. And I'll let you take it from there. If you had anything.
No, that's exactly what I would say. And that like ERP is essentially doing the complete opposite of what OCD wants you to do. And it's you just kind of turning your back and pushing it out of the way.
Yeah. And I know a lot of times people think that the goal of ERP therapy is to get rid of the thoughts or to get rid of the fear or to get rid of those urges or sensations. And it's not. That those things are natural and normal part of us, of being a person, of being a human with a brain. So the goal is to, like we said, to live with your life, or to live your life with those fears, with those thoughts, and not, and just accept that they are here, and responding to them more appropriately is really the goal.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love all these questions.
Yeah. Focusing in conversations due to my OCD. Any tips on that? I would just being as mindful and as present as you can. Like you'll always have intrusive thoughts rolling around in your brain, right? Like no matter how hard we try or how many times we wish them away, the thoughts will always be there. So just kind of recognizing that, yeah, I'm having this thought right now, but I'm sitting here and I'm talking with my friends, and I would much rather give my energy to sitting and talking with my friends than sitting here and just letting these thoughts take over the control of my time.
And I know something that I have used in that situation is delaying the thoughts, because a lot of times when you are not present in the conversations, you are stuck in your head, or you're giving into a compulsion, whether it's mental, physical, whatever it is. And if you can kind of tell yourself, in 5 minutes, let's revisit this thought. You'll have those 5 minutes to be able to be more present and focus on what you're doing. And odds are in 5 minutes, you'll kind of move on from the thought. And I know, again, that it sounds so simple, and it's not that easy, but a lot of times your brain, has that sense of urgency. And if you give it a few minutes or set a timer even, I know a lot of times that time comes and you're kind of
about.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I think, delaying a compulsion can be really helpful, especially if you're in a conversation or a work meeting or anything like that where you have to be present.
Absolutely.
Ray asked, how do you do an opposite action when you have pure O? My obsessions are always about past mistakes or self-harm or fear of the future. Don't know now to do opposite for that, or don't know how to do opposite for that.
So I would definitely chat with an ERP or OCD specialist about that to try to figure out what would be the best tool and the best exposure for that exact moment. And like usually when we talk about like doing an opposite of something, it's usually like OCD will tell you immediately that you need to move this pen or you need to write this thing down before you forget it, and because you get that huge sense of urgency. And so sometimes if you can just delay it or decide like, hey, I'm not going to give into it, that's usually like what we mean with doing an opposite action.
Yeah. And it is tricky. I know mental compulsions can be, again, really difficult to even recognize that they are compulsions. So that's, it is hard for sure, right?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a great question. What does being mindful mean? How do you do that? So being mindful just means being present, really, and mindful of the things you smell, the things you can hear, the things you can see and feel. I know you have a lot of wonderful things to add about that.
Yeah, and like being mindful is really just focusing on being in that exact present moment. So just like Mollie said, like things that you can smell or hear or feel. I find that mindfulness is really helpful for really any situation, like OCD related or not. Like if I'm feeling extremely overwhelmed by something or stressed out, or something's just not working out the way I want it to, or if it is an OCD related situation, just kind of taking a minute to like ground myself to like, okay, what are some things I can hear? What's like the goal of me being in this exact moment? Is someone talking to me? Just kind of trying to tune into those things.
Yeah, and it's kind of a cliche thing, but all we have is right now. We can't impact the past. We can't alter the future. We can be present right here, right now, and live, and just go through 1 second at a time if that's what it takes.
Yeah, and being mindful, I feel like it can help too. Just if you're really stuck with some thoughts in your brain, just taking 2 seconds to look around your room and see 2 things you can see, or changing the situation so you can go find something that smells really good to focus and redirect.
Yeah. So almost like being aware. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's a perfect way to describe it, just being aware of where you are, what you are doing, what you're, seeing. Yeah. And that, I think, what's really important too about mindfulness is that you can do it anywhere, always. It's not something you need, a massage parlor for. So I know a lot of times I think of mindfulness as this like,
it's huge relaxation.
Yeah, like a yoga retreat, and like you can be mindful literally right here, right now. And that's, I think that's the amazing thing about it, is it's just bringing your mind back to the present.
Yeah. And I really like that, like being aware, even if you're just aware of the thoughts that you're having or the things that OCD is wanting you to do. I think that's a huge win, looking at it as, oh, OCD wants me to do A, B, and C right now, but I'm doing this.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Special shout out here.
Oh, Thomas. Yeah, this is one of my work friends. That's so kind.
That's awesome.
He's been really great and supportive with helping smash some of those stigmas and misconceptions with with OCD, which is huge, I think, especially for individuals who don't have OCD.
Mm-hmm.
Just having another person out there who can advocate and chat about OCD openly and
Mm-hmm.
what it is.
And I know a lot of times in the like OCD, at least on Instagram, it is kind of like an echo chamber in the sense that everything we're saying we already kind of know, and we talk to a lot of other people who also are aware of it. So I love, that people that don't have OCD are learning from us and from what we do, because that's the point, that's the goal. So
exactly, yeah.
And Jasmine asked, is it normal to have a spike during your period? Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like hormones can totally change. Things are happening. I can even I even feel like weather can change it if it's been super cloudy and like dark, or if it gets extremely hot. Like I feel like so many things can play into having a spike. Yeah. Which I mean, that's probably not the answer you're looking for, but yeah, like I feel like anything really can spike.
Absolutely. Yeah, it is. It's like we said before, it doesn't discriminate. So anytime it can take advantage of your guards being down a little bit, your guard, I think, being down a little bit, it will. So that's, it is certainly normal, Jasmine.
And I think like even being able to kind of track some of those things. So if you know that OCD is like worse at one time of the month, or it's worse during certain times of the year, just kind of being aware of that and writing those down, right? Just so you're aware that, oh, like my OCD is really bad right now. This so you're kind of prepared and aware of those things, right? And you can put some extra steps in place or reach out for support sooner.
Yeah, and as much as I love the summer, I know that being hot and uncomfortable, it just makes you so much more irritable sometimes. And that, again, just letting your guard down a little bit.
Just adds to it.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so you know that OCD is the toxic one, but at the end it's causing me to hurt her, and I don't want to do that. She had already set her boundaries and moved on. I feel horrible. Well, I'm really sorry that has happened. OCD it's really hard, and it can take away so many things that we love and value in our lives, and it can ruin a lot of things. And so I'm sending you a lot of love, because that's really hard, and it's really uncomfortable to sit with. But I would definitely reach out. I know that NoCD does, they do support groups, don't they? Like on the app, you can just sign up for them. And so I feel like maybe even attending some support groups and seeing if there's other people that are in the same situation as you, and even just chatting briefly with the therapists that are there could really help too.
Yeah, and just to piggyback on that, the support groups are free. They are just a part of the app. You do not need to be going to therapy currently. You don't need to be seeing a therapist at all. They are just for you and for other people who have OCD and loved ones with OCD to experience. And they a lot of times are run by, but they are run by a therapist, but they are just through Zoom, and they are just for anyone to attend. So yeah, I think that's a great idea as well.
And I think it's totally normal to also grieve those things that OCD has taken away from you, right? And time that it's robbed, or relationships that it has. So it's completely valid to feel like any emotion that you're feeling through it is completely valid.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And I did want to go back to this, because I know that Jennifer had said it's been hard to find therapy. So many doctors can't take any more people during this pandemic. And yes, that is, I know now that some things are kind of opening back up, that some therapists are doing in-person therapy now, but online therapy is also still very available, and it is accessible to people who are maybe, live far from their closest therapist. So to, kind of toot our own horn, OCD does have therapists that are specialized in OCD and in treating OCD and using ERP. So I would definitely recommend reaching out to them.
Yeah.
As well. And then Andrea did ask about how do you sign up for that on the app. So just, I believe that is, because on my app, it is just kind of on that front page.
Yeah, that's where it is on mine too. You just download the app. Yeah. And then
it just says introducing, I think they're called community groups on there. Just click on there. It'll bring you to a Calendly link, and you can just choose whichever day fits with your schedule. I believe we still have ones on Saturdays as well. So if during the week it does not work, like I said, they're free. They're just for you to meet other people who have similar experiences. So I don't want to give you the wrong answer because I am not entirely sure. I do know they require you to have your camera on. So I don't know for privacy reasons the answer to this, and I don't want to give you the wrong answer. But I know you can ask on the app, and they might so the community groups are a little bit of a newer feature, so I don't entirely know the answer to that. So I apologize, but I would recommend just asking.
But they are confidential groups too. So things that are said or in people that you meet, it's confidential as well.
Good. Yeah. And that's really good to know because OCD shouldn't, but it does bring so much shame and so much guilt. And that's hard to open up when it's kind of strangers sometimes.
Oh, absolutely. Yep.
Well, I just realized that it is time, and I smell something so delicious cooking downstairs. So I'm really excited to go see what my partner has going on down there. So as always, thank you guys. Thank you, Anna. Thank you, OCD, for letting us do this. It's always so fun.
So much fun. I love doing these lives.
Yeah, so we'll be here throughout June. So Anna and I, Thursdays, right at this time, every week, we'll be here. Every other day throughout the week, we as well have other advocates or other therapists. Wednesday nights are hosted by Dr. Patrick McGrath. So if you have any clinical questions, always bring them to the Wednesday night chats. And we will see you guys next week.
Yeah, see everyone later. Thanks for joining today.